Hello and welcome to my vlog. I am Brian Foster, and today we're going to talk about another series 7 in our talks about the book Gone West. And this one is about colleges and hospitals in the spirit realm. And the person that wrote this, he had visions and he had conversations in the spirit realm, was J.S.M. Ward. And this was in the early uh, 20th century, and it's a very fascinating look. He's not a spiritist, but I compare and contrast what he wrote to what spiritist literature tells us. And he has I always like to see different points of view. This, like I've gone through many near death experiences, NDEs, and see different points of view, what people think the spirit realm is, what spiritist says it is, and compare how people could have some misconceptions and how they are the same, but maybe just through a little bit different lens. But before I start, please subscribe, hit the bell, hit the like button if you please, share this, leave a comment if you want more or have ideas of other videos you would like to see about Spiritism, asking questions. I have done several of those from people who've given me topics they'd like to discuss, and I find that very interesting. So let's get into it. And this is about the colleges and hospitals of the spirit realm. So first we start with how colleges organize. So this is the author saying, I found myself in HJL's study. He began with, I think I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. And he said, well, yes, I hope you will. It's quite a long time since you did, I replied. And I'm quoting. Well, it was necessary to get on with the narratives of the others, and further, I wanted to collect and sift further experiences. It would be no use giving you the almost same experience over and over again. So now I propose to tell you something about this college. So, very interesting. So, now we're going to hear about colleges in the spirit realm. There are all manner of institutions here and societies of almost every description. Some are devoted to develop one's spiritual nature, others to helping those less fortunate than ourselves. Some, again, are composed of kindred spirits bent on making new discoveries in the same subjects as interested them when on earth, while a fourth group devote their attention to inspiring men with new facts that they have discovered or developed here. Indeed, I could devote the whole of this meeting to merely mentioning the various types of societies that exist here. But instead, I will give you a few details of the four types just mentioned and a fuller description of an actual society, this college, which belongs to one of these types. Omitting number 1 for the moment, as the college and secondary schools belong to it, I'll take numbers 2, 3, and 4. Number 2 includes various societies devoted to rescuing souls in hell, and also others which endeavor to help men still on earth and to keep on the right path. The band of spirits who organizes the House of Refuge in hell are a good example of this type, and I talked about this in our previous live stream on YouTube. Then he goes on and says, number 3 includes many societies bent on working out scientific laws and principles of art, architecture, medicine, music, and so forth. I belong to a society of Renaissance architects who are bent on evolving new ideas without departing too far from the underlying principles of the Renaissance architecture. Number 4 is the corollary of number 2, as number 2 is a corollary of number 1. But many of the spirits who are in number 3 do not care about inspiring mortals with their discoveries. Sometimes this is because they're simply no longer interested in the earth, but often it is because they have discovered by painful experience that either their ideas become but the mere travesty of the original when impressed upon the minds of men, or far worse, they are taken and devoted to evil instead of to useful purposes. Thus, good ideas of art are extremely liable to suffer the former fate, while scientific or engineering ideas, being in some measure more mundane, are often properly grasped, but at the same time turned to evil uses by the perverse nature of men. Now, let me stop for there for a second. So again, this corresponds to what we've been told in many spiritist literature. And in fact, in the Communications of Spirits to the Reverend G. Val Owen in the book Beyond the Veil, she talks about the College of Colors, the College of Music, how they inspire men and women on earth with music or painting or colors or new discoveries. And sometimes it gets very difficult to get the idea through. And even Allan Kardec says in his book, The Book of Mediums, says that people of genius really are good mediums. They're good intuitive, inspirational mediums where they pick up these ideas from the spirit world. And we are told that the vast majority of ideas really come from the spirit world, and the people here who create them are conduits. That doesn't take away from their genius, because they had the idea and then they were able to take that idea and fashion it so it could be successful on earth. That takes a lot of intelligence and perseverance. So I'm not taking away anyone's genius on this, but most of the inspiration, and we are all inspirational mediums of one sort or another, comes mostly from the spirit world. Now, let me carry on. Thus, it is that a large body of spirits refuse absolutely to pass on their discoveries to men. The result is that many societies belonging to Group 3 impose the rule that no discovery made by any member of the society, while a member may be communicated either to a mortal or to any spirit who is a member of any society in Group 4. Not all societies, however, impose this rule, but leave it to the choice of the member whether he or she shall belong to a society in Group 4. All, however, abstain as societies from inspiring men. The work is left in the hands of Group 4. I might as well add that medical societies are particularly numerous in Group 4. And then JW asks, would you always belong to a society if you wish to inspire? Can't individuals do this work quite as well by themselves? And HJL, the spirit, said, well, it could be done, but not quite as well. In practice, we find it is better to have a society, although quite a small one. Now, about this college, it is under the control of a master who has a second in command. Then to assist them, there is a committee with a chairman. And then JW said, well, like a Freemason's lodge, a master, senior, and junior warden. And the spirit says, well, I don't know much about Freemasons, but that's rather the idea. The members of this college consist of 3 divisions. We are promoted from the first to the second, and from the second to the third, according as we learn the great spiritual truths. From the third or highest division, the committee is elected. The various officials are chosen by the head of the college from this committee. So then JW asks, well, it really is like a Freemason's lodge, which is 3 degrees and so on. And the spirit says, very likely. Probably the idea was inspired from this side. Still, it is a very natural arrangement and somewhat similar to college on earth with its first, second, and third year men and its fellows. And then JW asks, have you anything corresponding to an examination? And the answer was, not really. What happens is that our teachers, when they consider we have learned all there is to be learned in that degree, if so you like to call it, send us on to the next set of teachers. On entering this new degree, we are received with a certain amount of ceremony. These divisions, you quite understand, have nothing to do with the divisions of this plane. We are still in the division of half-belief. Those are the divisions he gave the names to. Even when in the 3rd degree in our college. That is why I rather jumped at the word degree to avoid confusion. And then JW asked, well, what degree are you in? He said, well, I'm still in the lowest, but I hope soon to be promoted to the next. Now is the time you return. So now let me tell you what Spiritism tells about colleges. Now, it's very interesting. So he talks about colleges, and he talks about education, and he talks about graduating from one level to the next. So this goes against many people's idea of heaven. Isn't heaven a place where we go to rest and relax and do nothing, right? Play on our harp amongst the clouds? Well, no. Spiritism brings us the unvarnished central truth. We don't know. Look, there's a lot we don't know, but I do tell a lot about heaven and the areas below in my book, Heaven and Below, in which I talk about what we do know from different Spiritist literature and a lot from the Reverend G. Val Owen about heaven and how it is organized. But now I want to talk about the colleges. And in that, this is a lot of what I'm talking about is in my book, Spirits in the Spirit Universe. Now first, why should you care? Right? Why is this important to you? Well, let's talk about it this way. If you are intent on entering a new job, mostly when you look at a new job, you want to investigate and discover about the company you are going to be in. If you go to an interview and say, well, would you like to join our organization? Do you know anything about our organization? And if you say the answer is, well, no, I just kind of wanted to make money. And goes, well, what do you want to do here? It goes, well, nothing, just rest. And they would look at you and say, well, I don't really think we would like you to join our organization. Well, I'm sorry to say to many people out there, including myself years ago, that heaven's the same way. They want people who are intellectually curious, self-disciplined, and motivated and motivate themselves, right? They will help motivate you, but they would really like you to be self-motivated. And I talk all about this in my book, Spirit and the Spirit Universe. But let's get on about colleges so you understand more of that. Because what I'm telling you is for your consideration so that you understand why you're on Earth, right? You're not on Earth just to be here, survive until your planned date to go, and then go to a nice place in heaven and be at rest for eternity. No, heaven is work. Now, it's fun work. You don't get fired. You don't worry about pay. You don't get sick. You do the job you'd like to do. But it's intellectually exciting. And that's really the way they want you. They want you to be intellectually excited. So you always want to learn more. Just like this spirit talking to our medium is, he wants to be a joint of society. He wants to go to the next level because it's fun and it's interesting. So now let me tell you what Spiritism tells. So let's start from the beginning. There is a plan for our children, right? Everybody knows, right? Let's compare it to here. First, they go to nursery school or start at kindergarten, then up through elementary school to high school. If the student is motivated or able, then on to college, which may entail multiple college and many years of study. Well, there is a process in the spirit world too, and it consists of graduated steps just like ours, except it lasts for all eternity. Now, for many, especially for me, I realize this last thing I just said is frightening because, believe me, when I was done with college, and I'm not saying everybody needs college here on Earth, that's not true, but you always need to keep learning. I was so done with it. No, I later went back and got my master's degree, but that was not because I was that interested in it, but because it was necessary to rise in the organization. So, but the good news is you don't have to go to these colleges or schools in the spirit universe. The only limitation in not choosing additional education is the inability to ascend to the next level of heaven. Therefore, if you wish, you could decide to take a break for 1,000 years or so. Free will is always respected in the spirit realm. You have the free will to park yourself at whatever level you like. You don't have to take a class. You don't have to join a debate group. None of that. Now, you may have less free realm of travel and other things, but that's part of what you decide. So the Spirit Zabdial reveals the process of education and ascending in book 2 of the book The Life Beyond the Veil, called the Highlands of Heaven section. And he tells the Reverend G. Val Owen how at each level, smaller communities contain education centers to teach the newer residents of any level, just as I described in the book Gone West. Then, if a student desires, they journey on to a larger population center for more study. Now, Zabdiel, in a previous communication, described a large heavenly city on the 10th level of heaven, and I described that book in chapter 11 in book 1 of Heaven and Below. And the city had a grand temple located on a hill. And in a message he sent to the Reverend Jival Owen on December 9th, 1913, Zabdiel reviews the structure of education. So this is interesting. I'll quote him. The temple shrine of which I spoke is of use not for worship alone, but for instruction of those competent to receive it. This is the high school of the sphere, and only those who have passed through the lower forms may come here for their final learning. At various points in that region are other schools or colleges, each for some special class of instruction in wisdom, and some few for the coordination of some of these branches together. The city itself has 3 of these colleges, where those who have passed through what I will call the provincial schools, which sounds like this is where the person was in Gone West, come to learn the relative value of the various teachings they have received and to combine them together. In many spheres, line is followed, but each sphere is both continuous and also in advance of the sphere inferior to itself. So from that, the lower to the higher spheres, there is a graduated and graded system of progress, and every step onward implies an added capability, not alone of power, but enjoyment of the using of it. So each level of heaven, there are more and more colleges, and you finish one level, and if you graduate, he says, it implies an added capability, not alone of power. And this is something I'm going to go in even a little bit more depth, but that doesn't. So what it means is you are actually altered. You're actually added to. You're given more tools in your toolbox. You have more power as a spirit. It's not just a piece of paper. It is raw power. This is why we're going through what we're going through on Earth, is to prepare ourselves for this great power. And when I say, what do I mean by power? I mean, thought is action. And the more higher and higher you go, the more you understand how to use your thoughts, the more power you have to use your thoughts to create and destroy and modify other things with other groups of spirits. That is what I'm talking about. Now, let's go back a bit. If one considers each stage of heaven independently, their system of driving students from beginning their education in small systems, small and centers, then advancing the graduating classes to major university hubs is quite similar to ours. As in our system, students are not obligated to graduate. They may change their minds and stay where they are or travel to lower spheres if that is their desire. Now, whatever detours a student takes at some point, they will most probably be motivated to once again begin the educational process. The signs of the joys of higher levels are everywhere in the spirit realm. The system is designed to present to the population at any given level the attraction of advancing higher. Every time a region is visited by higher spirits, the pageantry of their arrival demonstrates what lies ahead. The constant message is there are rewards in focusing your energy in learning. And the method is always the carrot, never the stick. A path is laid out of future possibilities. Spirits can see the rewards awaiting them. Hence, one reads about spirits creating difficult trials on earth with much suffering so they can purify themselves enough to climb to the next level. Now, let's talk about the professors, the instructors. Zabdiel tells us about the teachers that lead the classes. This is what he says. Instructors are mostly those who have qualified for the next sphere in advance, but who elect to stay in order to teach those who, in their turn, shall succeed them when at length they go on into their proper place of abode. From time to time, these preceptors do make their journey into the sphere above, and then return to continue their task. For they are enabled to bear it enhanced glory, while those who are of less degree are not able to do so. And also there come once and again those of higher spheres into the lower for friendly intercourse and conversation with their fellows who teach there, and then they nearly always are willing to condition themselves according to the environment of that same lower sphere, in order that they may impart some loving words of encouragement to the pupils. So, what did he tell us? What is pertinent and so unlike the majority of our teachers on earth is that all of the instructors have attained their position because they have actually been successful in the course they are teaching. I don't know about you, but in my experience in the schools on earth, one can always tell the difference between teachers teaching from theory and those teaching from experience. The quality of the classroom experience is, in the vast majority of cases, more pronounced and productive for the student. Nothing is more entertaining for the student than hearing the real life stories of a professor as part of a class. And at the same time, frequently unbeknownst to the listeners, valuable information is being disseminated. Those rare times when I have been privileged to be in a class led by one of these types of professors have been the most memorable and valuable. I also believe, for it has been hinted in various sections, that a student isn't excuse me, obliged to be locked in the classroom learning. There are missions to perform while in class, and there are exercises to undertake. One may travel to different spheres and even to Earth to facilitate an important task, all part of the broad educational experience. So imagine studying what is of vital interest to you. Remember back to that one class you couldn't get enough of. Now you have a glimpse of what life in heaven could be. This is, after all, why you are here on earth, why you are trekking through trial after trial, all to advance, to correct those blemishes, those primitive emotions which hold you back from ascending. So I hope this gives you just a peek. This entices you a little bit on the colleges in heaven. There is so much more. And I encourage everyone to start studying and reading about Spiritism so you can actually prepare yourself. If you can prepare yourself, just like going to that job interview, if you understand about where you're going to go, then you'll be more ready to become productive as soon as you pass over from this physical life. In fact, I'll tell you a story told by Chico Xavier, the great Brazilian medium. Now, Chico's mother was in the spirit world. And Chico, he was on earth at the time, and his sister, who was never a spiritist, she was a good Catholic woman, and she never left her church. God bless her. She died, and Chico asked his mother, "Well, how's my sister?" And she goes, "Well, I went to talk to your sister." And he goes, "And this is what happened." This is Chico's mother. And she says, "I talked to your sister and said, okay, we're going to put you in this Catholic colony so you can rest and relax and prepare yourself to life in the spirit realm." I said, "Take your time, get used to it, get used to the environment." She goes, "Oh, this is so nice." He goes, but mom, our mother, goes, I'm in a Catholic colony." He goes, "But what about a spiritist? What happens when a spiritist dies and comes over to here?" And she goes, "Well, they're put to work right away." Why? Because they are prepared for what they are over there, right? They're prepared to what awaits them. They are prepared to begin a task that they've left for a while, even though they probably worked on that task while they were asleep and wandering in the spirit world. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but they should be ready to do what they need to do. And they're not, they're always, depending on how you are, there's always periods of transition, but they understand the aim of the spirit world, right? And that is of learning and improving yourself and getting ready for your next life, because you want to improve yourself more. Now, eventually, when this planet Earth, our planet of atonement, where we pay for our past wrongs, becomes the planet of regeneration, We won't have to concentrate on, extracting the primitive emotions, hate, envy, jealousy, and, pride and selfishness. And we just want to concentrate on this in increasing uh, some talents that we want, more experiences, etc. Now, let's go more into the book. And this is now we're talking on about a hospital on the spirit plane. And so then our great psychic, right, said, I found myself in HJL's room. And he says, I went to see one of our mental hospitals recently. And then JW says, hospitals? I thought you said there was no pain here. You said it was left on the threshold of hell. And the spirit said, no, there isn't any pain. Still, some spirits come here whose minds have long been clouded, and these need treatments. And he goes, mental cases may be roughly divided on earth as follows. Now, of course, this is back in the early 20th century. So this language is not very, as we use it here. And he said, number one are idiots, and number two, lunatics. Now, the latter fall into at least three divisions. Number one, lunacy caused by physical defects in early or late in life, lunacy caused by evil life, or at least evil passions, and number three, lunacy caused by religious mania and such kindred mental disturbances and lack of balance, ergo excessive sorrow. And he goes, as regards to idiots, which is number one, there is a cause of some kind of physical defect, and its result is that the individual, to a greater or less extent, comes here ignorant and in need of teaching. The less knowledge they possess, the lower they will start. If they have no knowledge even of God and of a future life, they will go to the topmost division of hell. You remember, however, there is no real suffering there. There they will be taught in special schools, not either with the babes or the evil souls who are progressing. Some, however, have been able to acquire some knowledge of God in a future life and may come to us. Contrariwise, there may have sufficient intelligence to be responsible for turning their back on faith, but these are rare. The whole of this group, however, owe their mental difficulty to some physical, not spiritual defect, and therefore, once clear of the physical, need teaching but not medical treatment in any form. Let me stop there. This is backed up. And I want to tell a lot of people, because this has always been one of my fears. What happens, here, I'm mentally competent, at least sort of, at this moment. But what happens if I was hit on the head or got an automobile accident and I was severely disabled? Who would I be when I died and went to the spiritual world? Well, the answer is your spirit intelligence isn't affected. And what he is saying here is that these people who were severely damaged here on Earth, are and limited, that was probably a reason for their paraspirit, and it may have been a reason to confine them so they could only do so much as a planned trial. But when they come back, they'll have to go through some training to reconnect to their real spirit intelligence, because all spirits are created equal. You can all be as smart as the other person if that is what you want to be, right? If that is, you all have the same capability. It's not like on Earth, I'll never be as smart as, some nuclear physicist, and I'll never run as fast as anybody who, tried out for the Olympics, right? There's just no contest. But as a spirit, if that is what you want to persevere and dedicate yourself, you have as much capability and capacity and potential as any other spirit. So these people who are severely disabled on Earth could just be a brilliant, wonderful spirit person in the spirit world, but they'll just may have to go through a little bit of transition. Some may not, but a lot probably have to go through a little bit of transition to get themselves back to where they were. I'll carry on. Group 2, the lunatic, includes A and B, which is early or late in life. In the case of the former, it all depends what stage of spiritual development they had attained before the physical defect occurred, which rendered them insane. In the case of those thus afflicted in early life, it is probable that they'll have to go to elementary schools in the 7th division of hell, though of course they may know enough to enter our realm and go to secondary schools. In all probability, however, they'll not have time to commit many sins, for that which they'll have to undergo penance. Those afflicted later will have had time alike to acquire knowledge and therefore faith, and some time to do evil, for which they'll have to suffer. Their spiritual development, in short, will be that which they had reached when the insanity came upon them. Of course, many of the so-called lunatics, even when the lunacy is due solely to a physical defect or injuries, are not completely lacking in responsibility for their deeds. Often only part of the brain is affected, and in that case they may appear normal, except on 1 or 2 points. These shades of insanity are settled automatically. The spirit feels no need of remorse for offenses it had no intention of committing, and for which it cannot be responsible. It, of course, regrets any evil it may have been caused by it being unable to control its body, just as a motorist would grieve if his motor ran away and hurt someone. But that would not be the sense of moral guilt which would attach to him if the accident was due to his racing. So he's off a little bit here. And I understand what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that, these people come and over time they are cared for and they get back up to normal. Now, there's much more information if you read the books by Dr. Andre Louise, Psychograph by Shigo Xavier. There's and he goes a lot more into where he visits mental institutions and hospitals, and a lot of these people who have, obsession and are, have multiple personality disorders. They're bipolar. They're that reason. And before I say anything, the most important thing: always go to your psychiatrist, psychologist, or your doctor. The spirit world knows this is always important. But a lot of it, and there are spiritist mental hospitals in Brazil that take care of this, is caused by obsession by other spirits, and these other spirits want to affect that poor person negatively. They want to persecute that person because of something they did in some past experience in past lives to that spirit. So, and then what happens when they go to a spiritual hospital? They're again, like he's saying, they're educated and they're trained and they're soothed over, and then also what will happen is the spirits will try and talk to these obsessing spirits and say, look, this, the spirit world, karma is everything, right? The spirit world will take care of what this person did in the past. They will learn. All you are doing by trying to get revenge for what that person did to you is you're wasting your time. You are not ascending. You're just sitting here trying to hurt this other person, and you're not helping yourself. It's a very, terrible misuse of your own time to ascend. And look, they will be taken care of. You need to let go and forgive, because if you want to, and they never tell this thing, but I always think to myself, if I was talking to one of these people, it's probably a mistake because they never say this, is that, what they did to you, probably you did to someone else in a life that you don't remember, right? Everything comes around. So I just wanted to go into that. So then he goes on, he says, mental treatment will not be necessarily general in these cases, merely education. And before passing to the next group, let me remind you that many so-called maniacs are really unfortunate beings who are obsessed by other spirits. Okay, this is what I just said. For the crimes committed by those through the obsessive physical organism, that the unfortunate man is, of course, not responsible directly. He may, however, have to suffer here for them indirectly, insofar as it was his evil life that allowed an evil spirit to take control. Now carry on. When the responsibility goes so far as invoking evil spirits to aid him in his nefarious purposes, as did the ancient wizards, the moral guilt is tremendous. This is indeed one of the worst crimes possible, for which mental derangement is but the commencement of retribution. This type of obsession naturally leads us to consider cases 2 and 3. So then he talks about case 2, which is lunacy caused by evil life or at least passion. Now he says this group very largely goes to hell, but of course not all. It is these latter who chiefly need treatment in our hospitals as well as ordinary education. Spiritual pride and even commonplace conceit are potent factors for rendering people insane, as well as the most obvious vices such as drink and lust. So let's talk about this for lunacy and doing great evil. I'll give you an example. The spirit world is benevolent, and they try to help people who have done this way. I was reading a book by a person that worked with Chico Xavier, and they went to a mental hospital to look at people in this physical mental hospital. And this shows you how the spirit world, the complexity and detail of the spirit world works. And they look at this man who was severely disabled, and he couldn't even walk forward. He could only kind of walk backwards. And this guy, Chico said, "You know who that is?" And he says, "No." He goes, "You know who that is in a previous life?" No. He goes, "That was Mussolini. Mussolini, the dictator of Italy." He goes, "He's not here as a punishment per se. He's here so no other spirits can really bother him, because think of, you're a dictator. Think if you're the dictator, let's say right now of North Korea, and you die, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be after you and haven't learned what it is to forgive. And therefore, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get, Mussolini into a physical body, trying to get him rearranged. They're probably going to put him, after he dies, they're probably going back into a hospital and get him to feel, get back on their track, and get other spirits to say, let go of their hatred toward him. So at least at some time he can go back and have some normal life and get back on the track to become a good person. Now, of course, I can name other names. You go, well, that person's totally evil, right? Like Stalin or Mao. Well, everybody has good and evil in them. And everybody here on earth will become better someday. And here, I just have someone commenting saying, her person's telling me he's talking about Mussolini. Yes. And so therefore, in the spiritist hospitals here on earth, the physical earth, what they'll do is someone who is obsessed or bipolar, right? Caused by obsession sometimes. A lot of it could be physical, right? So always go to your doctor. They try and talk to the spirits who are obsessing this person and say, why are you trying to get revenge? And explain to them, as I said before, the futility of revenge. Let me give you another example. Another person who worked with Chico Xavier was in line with Chico, and as people would go through the line, they would talk to Chico. And then this couple came up to Chico, and they said, "Oh, Chico goes, can you please help us? Our daughter is just, is spiraling down into mental illness. And it's just, there's nothing we can do. We can't get her out of it." And Chico said, "Go help anybody you can. Go assist others." And then I forgot how, many months, maybe a year, whatever, later, the same couple came by and it goes, "Chico, our daughter's much better." And then after the day was done and Chico talked to this guy, he goes, "Well, remember that couple from a year ago or whatever, and their daughter's better now. You know why her daughter's better?" He goes, "No, because I told them to go help." And what they did is they went to prisons and tried to help the prisoners. Any way they could, they tried to help the prisoners, learn, help them with, goods or whatever. And he goes, what happened is the mothers of those prisoners, the mothers in the spirit world, saw this wonderful couple helping their sons in this, men's prison. And then they followed the couple home, and they saw spirits obsessing their daughter. And these mothers of these poor prisoners said, "Why are you doing this? This couple is helping our sons." He goes, "Please let let this woman go." And they said, "Okay." It probably wasn't that easy. I'm making the story short. They said, but they stopped obsessing her, and then she became better. So these things always come around, and there's always complications. If you look at the tapestry of our life, and there's so much interconnectedness, and everything's more complex than you see. That person who you hate, that may have been someone that did something bad to you, or they hate you because you did something bad to them in a previous life. That's why Jesus said, forgive 70 times 70. You don't want people trying to obsess you or you obsessing others. Forgive, get back together, understand, right? Ask for forgiveness and try to be as good as you can. So let me carry on into the book. And he talked about religious mania. So then I was taken by a man who during life had been a great mental specialist. And in this building was placed among the most beautiful surroundings, was seen to breathe an atmosphere of peace and rest. I mentioned this impression to my friend, the doctor, who replied, quite so. Quiet, soothing surroundings are the first essentials for dealing with any kind of mental disorder. The garden surrounding the hospital contain broad stretches of lawn interspersed with beautiful woods, and everywhere the soft notes of rippling or falling water were faintly audible. Ever and anon through the trees I caught the glint of water tinged with evening glow, and I saw many of the patients passing along a handsome avenue, and there was flower beds and everything. Then he said we passed into the building itself, and I found that in some ways the institution was arranged on a similar lines to those of the houses of refuge in hell. There was a secondary school attached, and most of the patients attended the school as part of their course of treatment. Further, there were concert halls and a theater, chapels for several different religious bodies, an art gallery, and so forth. Let me stop there. There is a marvelous book called The Memoirs of a Suicide by Ivan Piera. And in this book, Camilo Branco was a famous author in Portugal. He was called the Balzac of Portugal. He committed suicide in the late 1800s because he was going blind with syphilis. Now, he committed suicide and he had to spend some years in the lower zone, which happens to suicides because you are not allowed to rise to heaven. Now, there are exceptions to this. I don't want to say this all the time. Until your original due date was there. So if he was supposed to die at 70 and he committed suicide at 65, he'd have to spend 5 Earth years in that lower zone. Again, this is not the complete rule. There's always exceptions and all sorts of things. And so it doesn't happen all the time. But then after that time was up, he was taken to a hospital, and it was a beautiful hospital. And there were, just like this person, Spirit is saying, there were concert halls, there were art galleries, there were chapels, people were together, there were lessons. And in fact, one of the things they did at this hospital for suicides is they put them on a stage and it explained to them why they went through what they did. And the first thing they always said is, look, whatever horrible things happen to you, if you waited a week, a month, maybe a year, something would have changed and gotten you out of the situation. Because the tasks on earth aren't made for you to fail, right? No. And some of the tasks could be that you die at the end, but that's not necessarily a failure. That's just transitioning from one state to another. Yeah, as a spiritist, you have to dispel your ideas saying that death is a failure. No, death is just a transition. So it goes, if you just waited it out, something would have happened. It's like you're in the classroom. You just got to wait that 50 minutes for that bell to ring. Even if you hate the teacher and boy, this is boring, Time will march on and the bell will ring and you'll go to the next class. So very interesting. But they also had concerts. They actually even had a concert by Chopin, who were there, and it gave them this wonderful, not just music, but art and kind of what his life was like. It's kind of a multi media entertainment, and they said it was just wonderful. So this, again, what he said corresponds to what has been said in Spiritist literature. And I'll carry on. He goes, and my medical friend explained, one of our chief objects is to divert the mind of the patient from too much concentration upon themselves. Many were very selfish, or at any rate, self-centered folk. Religious mania or excessive grief is likewise the cause of many of these cases being here. Wholesome, soothing amusements, which will dispel the morbid trait in their characters, are therefore of the greatest value. As to direct treatment, we largely employ suggestion, hypnotism, and magnetism. So let me tell you about magnetism. Let me stop there for a second. Magnetism is a lot like where they put passes over and they try to rebalance the crown centers, the chakras, the force centers, as they say in Spiritism, of the person. And you can actually get passes. And if you go to a Spiritist center, you'll probably listen to a lecture on some Spiritist topic. And then at the end, you'll go into a room and they'll get passes. They won't touch you, but they'll just pass their hand back and forth, and you'll feel this power. And there's a spirit behind the medium, putting their hands by you, that flow that magnetic energy and to help balance your body and your vibrations. And that's what they do in the spirit world too, although more effectively. And he describes it because she was stretched on a bed, clad in a plain grayish-white robe, drawn in the middle at the waist by a girdle, and similar to the costume they all wear here. One doctor was standing behind her, with his hand gently resting on her forehead, while the other stood at her feet, but without touching her. Both men seemed to be concentrating their wills on her and gazing into her face. They made no movement or any sign that they were aware of our presence. I was able to perceive that from each that there appeared to flow out a kind of faint light, and that this light being focused, as it were, on her head. Now, in one of the books, I believe it was one of the Andre Louis series of books, they actually talked about psychic surgery, where they went into a spirit and found the cause of either an obsession or something, and they tried to extract that memory and maybe change it and modify it a bit. And in fact, they said in the future there will be psychic surgery here on Earth. Probably, hopefully, I don't know how far in the future. So this, and because if you think of us as logical constructs, right, and in spirit, you can read minds, right? Everything's right there, and you're really you're a personality and a character, and that your personality and character is composed of data and memories and everything around you. You can see how one can do that. Now, how all this works together to make you a unique personality and a wonderful person, I'm not sure, but that is what the spirit world is. The spirit world makes us just like we are, with all unique personalities and characters with free will, and therefore when you have all these high spirits, wonderful angels of light and wonderment, yet they're all somewhat different and they're all amazing in their own right. God does not want automata. They don't want a bunch of robots or ants all doing the same. This is the genius of the spirit universe. This is the genius of God. Why that whole whatever God is exactly is so far ahead of us. And in fact, the spirits say you can't understand God here on earth. The only way to approach understanding God is to try to understand Jesus Christ. And spirits say, even in the spirit universe and the levels around the earth of levels of heaven, even they don't understand God. They have to keep rising and rising and rising. So And then they said we entered another room and found a hypnotist at work, and he was making passes over someone. And as soon as he saw us, he bowed and explained that this patient could not eliminate from his mind the remembrances of a terrible accident for which he was to a certain extent responsible. The remembrance of this had turned his brain on earth, and the ill effects were not entirely yet removed from his mind. So I'm hypnotizing him for a time so as to compel him to forget this terrible experience. This is a psychic surgery, so I explain it right now. So by degrees, we shall restore peace to his mind. And as my medical friend said, he goes, this is a strange case and shows how strong is the power of the mind and even the remembrance of the body after death. This woman's mental affliction in life took the form of a belief that she was a cripple unable to walk. There was nothing organically wrong, yet by degrees, as this hallucination grew upon her, she became crippled and misshapen, even as she is now. Had the disease been a physical one, she would have left it behind at her death. But it is purely a mental one, due to a morbid nature, which in life seemed to take a perverted joy in gazing at the misshapen and the crippled. This she did not from any motive of sorrow or wish to help the sufferers, but out of a morbid curiosity. For the rest, however, she was neither a total unbeliever nor yet evil by nature. Few cases such as this come to us here. They are, I understand, more common in the lower zones. Because, well, how did you treat her? Mainly by magnetism, which passes in mental suggestion. We are striving to prove to her that her spiritual body need not reproduce the defects of the physical one. Now, this is a very, astounding case. But when you think of that, the same thing happens when drug addicts or alcoholics move over from the physical life to the spirit life. Their bodies do not need drugs or alcohol, but their mind thinks that they do. So they are still somewhat addicts when they go over in the spirit world. They don't really need it. It's not changing your receptors. It's not physically, you don't go through DTs or any of that. Yet they still want it because that is what their mind tells them to. The mind is so powerful. And that's what happens to a lot of lower spirits, that they will congregate around other incarnate people physically on earth, drug users and alcoholics, and they'll get right close to them and they'll just breathe in that alcohol and get that feeling. That it must be why it is so hard to reform yourself if you're an addict of some sort, because you have all these spirits around you saying, drink, or take this drug, right? Because they want to feel that effect. And you're having all these mental suggestions for you not to become better. It is very tough. And that's why I think a lot of it is the Alcoholics Anonymous really emphasizes forgiveness and then religion and God, because you've got to have that higher faith to get through all these horrible suggestions from other spirits to keep on what you're doing down the wrong path. So then, then he says, well, is there an operating theater? And he goes, no, we've long gone past those clumsy methods here. There's no reason for an operating theater. There's no, owing to the material nature, on earth are required because you're physically, material, but here it's not, because the spirit body yields and needs much subtler methods. So I hope this helps explain to you much better about life in the spirit world and how it is superior in all the ways, and this is how his idea corresponds with what I have read from multiple spiritist sources. In the book Gone West, this is just his idea, and this is why Spiritism is so powerful. So let me talk about that for a second. A lot of people have written books saying, I've talked to this spirit and I have, this is what I know about heaven and the spirit world and how all this works. And I'm sure a lot of that is true, but they all, they've talked to the spirit and they've all done it through their own filter, their own point of view. But yet in Spiritism is multiple point of view. And Spiritism, of course, was brought to us by the Spirit of Truth as promised by Jesus in the New Testament. And Allan Kardec codified responses from a multitude of spirits, and he codified that into the Spirits book, and then he wrote other books too. And one should start with that book and read that book first. But then what I've done in my book 2, you might want to read book 1 first, but book 2 is Spirit in the Universe. They can all stand alone. And exactly how does these colleges, how they feed in each other, how you grow from one level to the next, what do you learn? What is the classroom like? What are the powers of the Spirit? All that. And the more you understand that type of information, the more you can reason yourself why you want to improve and why you want to study your own spirituality. It doesn't have to be Spiritism. It's just your own spirituality. Try to follow the golden rule. Try to do good with each other. Be loving, caring, and honest. As I tell people, you can be an atheist and not believe anything, but if you're a good person, spirit world will help you. You don't have to be baptized. You don't have to not eat certain food. You have to be a good person. That is the most important thing. So again, I just want to say that I think for those of you who really want to understand, why should I care? Right? Because I go through Spiritism. Some people, I have books like How to Live Inner Peace with Spiritism, where emotionally and your personality, how you can change it to get yourself ready to ascend. But I know a lot of people, and this is me, we have to know, okay, what's there waiting for us? Why should I motivate myself? And this is why I really go into these books. And then just as to make sure I complete it is I just want to show this is really the book that you probably, if you can, so people learn different ways, but the Spirits book, you can get that on PDF, and it's, or you can get it on, you can go to my site, NW Spiritism, click on his picture, and it'll take you to a bookstore. You can get it. You can also get it on Amazon.com or order it through your local bookstore. But you can, get in PDF, which I did. That's when I first read and understood about it. So, I have a question. I'm at the end, really. So it says, why do some parents curse their children? Or why do some parents want their children to remain single or take on vows of poverty? Well, that's a good question. And I'm sure there are many reasons. Now, when they say, actually, this was covered somewhat in the Spirits book when they ask, why are some parents bad parents? Now, this may not mean that they're bad parents, but if they curse their children, they are not good parents. And what they say is bad parents are always primitive spirits, meaning they came from a less advanced planet and they are not as mature. And if you're a good child with those type of parents, most probably you self-selected that trial because you in your mind, or what you're in the actuality in some previous life, you were not a good parent. And therefore you needed to experience what it was like having a not very good parent. And your parents were selected because they're not very advanced and they didn't know how to love and revere their children. And that is usually the case because you ask for that. And that's a very hard trial. And I've talked to quite a few people who have had extremely difficult parents. And you're the one who is most probably, it's twofold. You're the one is at a higher level. And so the spirit world is having you as their child because you asked for it. You wanted to know the experience of being, what the effect of a child is with a bad parent. In fact, I talked to this one medium. He told me that his parents didn't really care about him. And he says, and I know why. He goes, because I was in the ballet and that's all I cared about was the ballet. And I just completely ignored my children, didn't care. I had children, but I completely ignored them. And now, guess what? He was completely ignored by his parents. So he understood that. It's sad, and you don't really want to see that going through. but he was such an intelligent person that most probably he said, no, I need this for me to atone for what I've done wrong in the past. And therefore, you, the person, experiencing this, let's say they wanted you to take a vow of poverty, you may have tried to force someone to say, no, okay, you're the second son, you need to go into the church and take a vow of poverty. Or are you, my daughter, you're going to be a nun, right? Because you know how some Catholic families, and of course other religions the same way, the Buddhist priest, of these things happening. Now you say, okay, I have no memory of these previous agreements. You're probably not allowed that. You only have, it's if you're a medium, if you're not only going to be selectively allowed of previous lives of what is given to you. And you may not be allowed to that because your parents may actually, in your relationship with your parents, may even be worse than you think. You may have done great harm to them in the past, and they didn't want you to know that. So there are other reasons that could happen for that, in that case. So these things are, so the most important thing I want to emphasize is that what you're going through, if you have bad parents, this is for anyone out there, isn't to punish you. It is for your learning and edification. This is to show you this is what you have done in the past, something similar. And usually it's more benign than what you have done in the past. You probably have done something worse in the past, and you actually have a pretty easy time of it in this life, even though in the circumstances that anybody is in, doesn't feel it, right? Because it's always worse when it happens to you, and it's a very difficult situation to go through. But there's always a reason. It's not punishment, it's for your learning. And therefore, you need to analyze your parents' actions and character and say, okay, they are my parents. I love them, but they're not very good. They have a long ways to learn. They misdirect me. I'm going to have to rise above that. Maybe you have to distance yourself. You try to help them as you can, but understand that they don't really have the spiritual maturity to help you as you need to be helped. Probably because you didn't help other children as they needed to be helped in a previous life. I know that's probably not of comfort, but the comfort that is that if you can forgive and love them and understand that someday in time, they will become better spirits, more mature spirits, and try to concentrate on that and see their maturity as a trend line in time, hopefully going up. A lot of times they may say, level for a while, but hopefully going up over time, that someday that they will be wonderful parents and wonderful children themselves. And that you have gone through one heck of a tough trial. And if you have learned your lesson saying, I'm never going to be like them, I understand what it is to be like them now, you will have gone through that trial. And in your next life, you will not have to go through it again. So I hope that helps to whatever small extent I can give you. Anyway, I want to say I'm at the end of my time. I want to say God bless everyone. Please subscribe, hit the bell, go to my site, NW Spiritism, study about Spiritism. If you really want to understand why you're going through what you're going, your trials and tribulations, the more you study and understand that why we're on earth to be trained, to get rid of all of our mistakes, then you will feel much better, and the trials and tribulations will become less harsh to you, and you can look at them from outside of your body, from on top of the mountain. And oh yes, and this affects, yeah. So yes, your attitude is tough because and you're doing your best. And all I can say is, no matter what happens in your relationship and with your children, try and act as honorable as possible, even if your spouse doesn't, but always protect the children. Now, in the Spirit's book, even they say divorce is a man-made law, that there's no such thing as you have to be married forever, but one should always make sure that the children are not affected. I know that's very hard, but try and help that person as much as you can. Try to be understanding and know that your spouse is putting up with you, and you're putting up with, with her or him, and that we're on a planet of atonement, right? We're not perfect spirits. We're all learning, and we're all trying to learn from each other as much as we can. And therefore, try always to be nice and analyze your own actions and how you can make things better for others. Anyway, keep hanging there. And if you want to explain more about your situation for anybody out there, you can go to my site, nwspiritism.com, and you can hit the About Me contact. Email me. You and I can set up a time. You can email me what you're saying. Many people do. Sometimes I'll talk to people through WhatsApp or Skype, or we'll just email back and forth. I'll be happy, just to give you my poor advice, for nothing, of course. And, hopefully if I can be of any help, or if I can tell you the wrong thing and you say, oh no, he doesn't know what he's talking about, but now I know what to do. Even that might be of help. Anyway, I want to say, everybody, God bless for everyone.